Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the lovely neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so excited that you are part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/Reading with Your Kids. It's at Jedley Magic on Twitter, and it's at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram. We have a wonderful guest for you today. She is the author of the 47 People You'll Meet in Middle School. She's coming to us from Orange, New Jersey. Her name is Kristin Mahoney. Now, I really love having opportunities to speak with authors from all around the world, and it's really fun speaking with an author who lives in a community that I've had the honor of performing in. And I've had the honor of performing in Kristin's hometown of South Orange, New Jersey, many times. I would love to have the opportunity to come and perform in your community. I was just out making my first performances in California not too long ago. I had such a great time performing at the Orange County Children's Book Festival. It was so much fun. I also performed at St. Cecilia's School in Tustin, California. What a neat little community. I also had a chance not too long ago to perform at St. Patrick's School down in McGowan, Tennessee. And the principal there, Mary Watson, Sister Mary Watson, she wrote this beautiful recommendation for me on the alignable.com site. She said, Jedley came to our school and gave the most entertaining presentation to our students. We were all engaged and enthralled from beginning to end. His show helped every child to feel important and valued. Man, I can't tell you. I mean, that is absolutely why I do my shows, to help make every child feel valued. It's such a blessing to me, and I would love to come to your community. To find out more about my show, there are two places you can go. You can go to my website, jedley.com, Jedlie, jedley.com. You can also find out about the show on the readingwithyourkids.com website. And let me tell you, if you are in Chicago, November 23rd and 24th, you can see me perform at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. That's right, the Reading with Your Kids podcast is going to have a beautiful, I'm really excited about this booth that we are putting together. It's a totally interactive booth that will give you and your kids the opportunity to find out what it feels like to be a part of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're going to be interviewing families and asking them about their favorite books, asking them to give a review of some of the books that we will be featuring at the booth, and you will get a souvenir copy of that interview, and that interview may appear on a future episode of the show. It's all happening November 23rd and 24th at the largest toy and game fair in North America, the Chicago Toy and Game Fair at Navy Pier in beautiful Chicago. And check this out. In addition to meeting me and possibly being on the show, kids will get a chance to play with life-size toys and games from all over the world. They will get a chance to meet inventors, authors, and be parts of totally interactive live stage shows. And you can save $3 on every ticket you purchase by going to shytag.com, CHITAG.com, shytag.com, and using the promo code RWYK. That's our initials, Reading with Your Kids. RWYK, save $3 off of every ticket for the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 23rd and 24th at Navy Pier. Join us right now from the beautiful state of New Jersey. I actually love New Jersey. It is such a fun place. Our author today is the author of a great middle grade book called The 47 People You'll Meet in Middle School. Please welcome to the show, Kristin Mahoney. Kristin, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. Thanks for the intro, and thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited too. You know, the folks over at Penguin Random House, they're so kind. They send me books all the time. And it's really great. And I love going through them and reviewing them and deciding which authors we want on the show. As soon as I opened up the package and saw the 47 people you'll meet in middle school, I said, I don't have to open up this book. I want this author on. Because middle school is such It's such a turning point in the lives of so many kids.
Right. It certainly is. Yeah. And thank you. That's nice to say. I feel like I should also credit the illustrator of the cover, Hei-Su Lee, who did, a wonderful job, I think, of making it a book that people are even more eager to open, because she really sort of captured the mood and the feel of the story really well with that energetic cover. So, but no, thank you. I think it's definitely a time of life that is fascinating and, much like New Jersey, I think it's underrated. Thanks also for your nice words about New Jersey. I think, middle school and New Jersey both can get a bad rap, but there are good things for sure about both.
Yeah, and you and I, we were talking about decisions that we make as we grow, as we become parents, as we're thinking about retirement. One of the things that struck me, not so much that I'm reflecting back on my own life in middle school, because that was like so many decades ago. But looking back at my kids and their friends as they traverse middle school, and you and I were talking about the choices that we have. I think one of the things that a lot of middle school kids feel is that they don't have a lot of choices.
Right. Right. It's really hard because it's a time in your life when, you're starting to have your own really strong opinions about things and things that you feel passionate about and that you would like to do, or things you passionately feel that you would not like to do, like PE class or math class. And, you're right. You don't have a lot of control over that. And so it sort of becomes an interesting period of time in which, I think people are figuring out where they can have control over decisions and, where they can have some more independence. And it's tricky. It makes for sort of an interesting social world for sure.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, about the 47 people you'll meet in middle school and about the fascinating characters that we'll meet.
Okay. Well, it's written as a letter from the main character, whose name is Augusta. She goes by Gus for short. And she's writing a letter to her younger sister, Louisa, who she calls Louie. Louie is in 4th grade and Gus is in 6th grade. And it's November of Gus's 6th grade year. And so far, Louie is dying to know what middle school is like. And she keeps asking Gus what it's like. And, I think a lot of us were like this, as 6th graders. I still am, so I get home and my family wants to hear all about my day, and I'm tired and don't feel like answering right away, and the information will come out when I'm ready for it. And, I certainly was that way as a kid. And so that's what Gus is feeling. So every time Louie says, tell me about school and tell me about the dance and tell me about your teachers and tell me where you're sitting at lunch. And, she just keeps saying, it's fine, whatever, school's fine. She doesn't feel like talking about it. And they also have a lot going on in their family. At the time, not only is Gus starting a new school, but their parents have also recently gone through a divorce. And, she and Louie are sort of navigating that in their own separate ways. And there's definitely more of a desire on Louie's part to bond with Gus, and Gus is kind of not having it. But then through the course of the book, she sort of starts to appreciate Louie a little bit more and realize that Louie needs her. And so in November, she writes this letter, telling Louie what you can expect in middle school. And sort of the premise is that time passes in middle school, in a different way than it does in elementary school. In elementary school, it's more about the seasons and just sort of traditional passage of time. But with middle school, you sort of mark time more by your friendships and how close you're getting to people and who you're hanging out with. I mean, I think a lot of us think of the people that you hung out with maybe the first week of school would be entirely different from the people you're hanging out with at the end of the school year. And it's an age where you start figuring out why you're gravitating towards certain kinds of people and who your people are. And Gus has her favorite teacher becomes her language arts teacher, who says she hopes that this can be a year where they start finding their village, meaning the people who can support them and who appreciate them for who they are. And so Gus writes about people who did wind up being, that village for her and others who definitely didn't. For example, there's one friend, her friend Sarah, who is somebody she recognizes on the first day of school because they had played soccer together in second grade, but, you know, they hadn't seen each other since then. And neither of them has anyone to sit with at lunch. And they sort of, are bonded through that and then wind up becoming good friends because they realize they have a lot in common. And then there are other kids who are way more interested than Gus is in things like, the clothes they're wearing and planning the school dance and things that she's just not very into, and she starts to realize those are not her people. And then there's just other characters along the way, like the homeroom teacher and the gym teacher, and she meets a couple of police officers. I won't give spoilers on that, but there are things that happen throughout the story that bring the police into their lives in different ways. So yeah, that's sort of the structure of the book and the structure of Gus's first year at middle school.
You know, as you're talking about the book and about Gus, I just had a pleasure last week of performing at Thornburg Middle School down in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. And it's a school that I've been going down for the last 15, 16 years, performing for their sixth graders, reminding them of, you know, of the school's desire for everybody to be respectful of each other and to work cooperatively. And as you're talking about the different kids, I'm looking back and I'm looking out at that audience I was with last week. And one of the things about sixth grade is you know, we were talking about diversity earlier. That's, you know, you have some kids who look like they could still pass for third graders, and then other kids who look like they could pass for adults. And it's really a time when, you know, the interests are really, different. You know, elementary school, you know, there are some kids into sports and some kids into dance and some kids into reading. But that really starts to break off, and kids start to get into niches much more in sixth grade.
Right. It's true. And it's funny. My own two daughters actually are both in middle school right now. One's in sixth grade and one's in eighth. And, I remember when my older one started, I feel like it was maybe in fifth grade. I hope she doesn't get annoyed for me saying this, but she, you know, all of them, it was certainly not just her, all of them at that age start, for lack of a better word, becoming awkward. I mean, she will admit it. She'll say, oh, I feel awkward about this, and, you know, becoming awkward in different ways. And I remember saying to my friends, I am feeling the same kind of tenderness toward her right now that I felt when she was a toddler, like that I just, and I don't think middle school kids get that description very often or that credit. You know, nobody thinks they're cute anymore or lovable. And I was feeling the opposite. I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is a whole new level of you trying to find your way in the world. And, yeah, certainly as you look at the differences in their bodies and their abilities and their interests, and, you know, they certainly seem heightened more at this age than at any other. And, yeah, it just made me feel like, you know, I just kind of always wanted to hug her, even though she didn't necessarily always want to be hugged. But, yeah, I think it's such a special age in that regard, but it can also make it really hard for them.
One of the things, and it occurred to me a couple of times, it certainly occurred to me when my son was going through, and he had a very, very difficult sixth grade. And also when I meet different middle school grade groups, it seems like there are so many kids who feel this pressure to kind of act like they know everything because they think everybody else knows everything, and I'm like the only one who doesn't know anything. And I remember talking to my son and his friends one night, you know, just saying that. I'm like, going, you guys are all trying to kid each other to let each other know that you know everything. None of you guys know anything. So why don't we just start there? Right.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, I think it's something, gosh, that it took me at least until adulthood to make peace with that and to realize that, like, there's a power in admitting that you don't know everything, and it's okay to be vulnerable and, you know, open yourself up to what other people might have to teach you. But I remember at that age, it's all about, you know, wondering all the time what other people are thinking of you, or what, you know, if there's a certain way you're supposed to be acting that you're not acting, or, you know, if your jokes really are funny to anyone but you or your mom, you know. And yeah, it's really tricky. It takes a long time to realize that it's okay to let that guard down. And, you know, in middle school, you genuinely, you might have real reason to feel like it's not okay to let your guard down. Like it's, I think there's a certain survival instinct that is at play there, that for good reason, because, being vulnerable doesn't always work out for you as well when you're that age.
Yeah, and that's a really hard reality for a lot of parents to remember, that middle school can be a dangerous place, depending on where you are. What was it that inspired you to write the 47 people you meet in middle school?
Well, I was definitely inspired by my own daughters, who were pretty much, I guess about the ages of the two sisters in the book, when I started writing. So it gave me the idea. I mean, I definitely saw in my younger daughter an interest in learning what her older sister's school was like. And, my older daughter wasn't as forthcoming as maybe, her sister wanted her to be, although she was more forthcoming than Gus in the book. It's hard. It's hard to just, how do you describe this whole new world to a kid who hasn't seen it yet? Like, so I thought about that, like what would be a way that one sister might describe it to another. And then I also thought a lot about my memories of kids who I had gone to school with, and some just really unique characters whose stories I think I'll never forget. And I started talking to my husband about it, and he had some kooky stories about kids he had grown up with. And I thought, everyone has these stories. Let me send out an email. So I emailed probably, 25 or 30 friends and said, the subject of the email was, tell me about your characters. And I said, I promise anonymity, and I'll change identifying details. And obviously, don't tell me anything that you'd rather not share at all. But if you can tell me about kids that you remember from school, I'd like to write a book about the people you meet in middle school. And I would love to use some of your stories as inspiration. And so I got so many. I mean, it was hilarious, the things that people remembered and the ideas that they had. And some of the specific stories that I used from friends were, one friend had told me she actually had a gooser in her school, the kid who they called the gooser, who walked around pinching girls' bottoms. And so I put that in the book. There was another friend who told me that he did have a teacher who used Banaka breath spray all the time, and that he and the kids in his class would have contests when the teacher left the room to see who could take the most sprays of Banaka. So I made that a chapter in the book. And it was funny that I was talking to that friend this summer, and he said when he was reading the book, he was just picturing himself back in his middle school classroom where that happened, and he wanted to tell his friends about it. So those were a couple of the things I used. I myself knew a kid in my middle school who talked to his lunchbox, so I put that in the book. So that's where some of the smaller story inspirations came from. I had friends who were nice enough to share, and it was sort of fun to play with that.
That sounds like fun. What you mentioned, the PE teacher. Because I have very vivid memories of the PE teachers in my middle school. Can you share a little bit about the PE teacher we'll meet in the 47 people you'll meet in middle school? Yes.
So she's very rigid and focused on rules. And I think we first meet her at the beginning of the school year, when she tells all the kids in the class that they need to sit in the first row, or maybe the first two rows of the bleachers. And that's when Gus meets someone who will wind up becoming her friend, a girl named Quincy, who realizes it's ridiculous because there's not room for the whole class on the first bleacher. So she sits a few rows back, and she gets in trouble for that, and has to have a talk with the teacher. And the teacher is very displeased that Quincy has broken this rule and that she's not following directions. And I think we all had teachers like that who were a little bit pedantic and overly focused on the rules, even when they didn't necessarily make sense. And I myself was the kind of kid who would have squeezed onto the first bleacher no matter what, even if I was horribly uncomfortable, because that was what the teacher said. And I was a rule follower. But I liked the idea of exploring a character who did not do that and sort of realized this was a ridiculous rule, and, she was going to do her own thing. I feel like that's, if I had middle school to do over again, I might be a little more of a rule questioner than I was. And so that was one example of that.
Is that something that you enjoy as an author, kind of remembering who you were and kind of exploring who you could have been through some of the characters that you're creating?
Yes, that's one of my favorite things. Quincy was definitely one of my favorite characters to write because she was a bit of a renegade, and like I said, definitely not the kind of kid I was. Gus even is a bit more rebellious than I was. I never would have suggested, a gambling pool in my middle school classroom where we all would take turn, where we would take the teacher's breath spray out of his desk and take turns seeing how much breath spray we could use. Oh my goodness, it makes me like a little sweaty to just even think about that. So yes, it's definitely fun. Being a writer lets you, live in other characters' brains a little bit, which is really fun.
Yeah. One of the other things you were talking about, not only does Gus and her sister need to deal with, being in this, Gus being in middle school, but both sisters are dealing with the fact that their parents just divorced. And that does seem to be a time where a lot of kids, the most difficult part of their social life is also the time when a lot of families are kind of falling apart.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted, to explore how that was for them because it's tricky. Like as Gus is starting to think a lot about who she is and what her identity is as a kid on her own, as a friend and as a student. Her, zone of stability is also falling apart a little bit. And that definitely can play into your identity as well. Like who is my family and what is my role here? And, I wanted to write about an amicable divorce. That was, important to me because I don't always think that's depicted enough. And I think a lot of divorces are that way, thankfully, as it becomes, I think as time goes on and people become a little more astute at navigating relationships, I feel like I know of more amicable divorces than I used to. But that doesn't mean it's easy for everybody. And there certainly are sticky moments and, tense and awkward moments. And I, wanted to explore a bit how that was for Gus and Louie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things I love asking authors is what kind of conversations do you think, because this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And I don't necessarily see you mentioning that your daughter, you just wanted to hug her when she was in 6th grade and she didn't always want to be hugged. So I don't necessarily see a lot of middle school kids snuggling up on the couch reading this aloud with their families. But I absolutely think this is a book that parents should read with their kids, if for no other reason than to remind themselves the kind of minefield that their kids are going through sometimes in middle school. But what kind of conversations do you think families can have if they're co-reading the 47 people you'll meet in middle school together?
Oh, that's a great question. And thank you for saying that. I think it's a good book for parents to read too. I think there are a lot of situations that arise in the book that could present good opportunities for conversations between kids and their parents. The first one that comes to mind is the gooser, this boy who's going around pinching girls' bottoms. Talk about bullying and respect of personal space has certainly come a long way since I was a kid, but those things certainly do still happen. And I think kids don't always realize that, there are situations that should not just be part of the status quo and that there are behaviors that should be reported. And so I think that certainly is an opportunity for conversation. Parents can say, do you know of anybody who's experienced this at your school or anyone at your school who does things like that? That's worth a talk. And also even, I think like the example of Quincy breaking the silly rule of having to sit on the first bleacher. I would be curious, actually. I'm thinking, now that you mention it, I kind of want to talk to my own kids about that and see, if I would ask them, like, what do you think about the fact that she broke this rule? Like, is it ever okay to break a rule that a teacher has, laid out for you? And why is that or is that not okay? And, there's not necessarily a right answer, but I think conversation about that kind of stuff is important. We had my daughter a couple of years ago, was sort of in a civil disobedience situation in her own school where, the kids were allowed to leave school for, I think maybe like 17 minutes or something, as a protest march, or a march in support of, stricter gun regulations. And this was, I think, on the 1-year anniversary of the Parkland shootings. And she stayed out for longer. She and, meant probably at least 50 other students stayed out longer than the allotted time. And, so we talked about that because she was breaking a school rule and she wasn't supposed to, but, it also was an opportunity to talk about civil disobedience and, when you feel strongly enough about something to break a rule. And, so that was the sort of conversation that, was useful to us in that scenario. And I think this book can also present chances for talks like that.
Yeah. And there's such important conversations, and doing it while talking about a book, it kind of makes it easier, I think, for kids. We talk a lot about the fact when your kids are younger and you're reading a book about a bully, you're not talking about them, you're talking about the situation in the book. And hey, do you know any, like you said, do you know any, anybody that this is happening to at school? Even my daughter and I now, we talk about stuff that we watch on TV, and there's some conversations that are just easier when you're talking about characters as opposed to talking about yourself directly. And that's why we really, really, hope to inspire families with kids of all ages to continue to read with their kids. It's such a blessing. It's so much fun.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you're doing all that you are to promote that, because it's really important. I mean, I'm lucky. My kids still, well, at least my younger daughter and sometimes my older daughter still let me read to them. It depends on the book. They're pickier about the choice than they used to be, but I'd love to keep it going as long as I can, because you're right. It gives so many chances for those kinds of conversations, and it, like you said, it's easier than saying, here's what happened to me. But, talking about what happens to a character gives it like a different kind of safe space to have those conversations. And it's really important.
Yeah. The last book my daughter and I co-read together, I don't think we would have had fun reading it out loud. It was In Cold Blood by Truman Capote.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, we haven't really done any co-reading yet, which is weird. We've read, I read the Trevor Noah memoir earlier this year, and then my daughter did read it after me, and we talked about it. So, but then I'm getting old and I forget things. So I think co-reading would probably be more useful for us, but we do it at the same time. What do? Would you each have copies of the same book, or did you trade it back and forth?
I think within Cold Blood, I'm a Kindle guy. My daughter had the paperback and I grabbed the Kindle, and she finished it because she's smarter than me and she's a better reader than I am. But she finished it beforehand. And it was one of these, we'd be sitting down and hey, did you read about this? But no, not yet.
Right. Don't spoil it. Yeah.
But again, that's just one of the fun, there's not a lot that a man almost 100 and a 23-year-old can do together. That's a lot of fun. So reading is definitely one of those things. Tell us where we can connect with Kristin Mahoney and find out more about you and more about the 47 people you'll meet in middle school.
Okay. Well, a few places. My website is KristinMahoneyBooks.com. And also I'm on Instagram at Kristin Mahoney Books, and Twitter I'm at KMcMahoney. So KMCMahoney. And those are the online places. I'll be at a couple of book festivals coming up. I'll be in Glen Rock, New Jersey on October 5th and Warwick, New York on October 12th. So I'm looking forward to those. If there's any readers in that area who want to stop by and say hi and get a book signed, that would be great. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, I've had a real blast speaking with the author of the 47 people you'll meet in middle school. And it's not the only book that she's written. She is also the author of Annie's Life in Lists, but we're not going to talk about that because I'm going to invite Kristin back to talk about that book on another podcast.
That would be great.
We've been talking to Kristin Mahoney. Kristin, thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thanks so much, Jed. I appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Kristen Lear. She is a bat expert. No, not a baseball bat expert, a bat expert. She's going to be talking to us about how kids and parents can help bats, what a bat house is, how we can talk to our kids about bats, the history of why people freak out about bats, and how useful and important bats are to our environment. It's a fabulous, fabulous conversation. You do not want to miss it. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, if you are the author of a fantastic children's book, you were probably amazed to find out that after your book was published, you had a new job handed to you, and probably didn't even want it. You became the marketing director for your book. And that can be really tough, especially for an author that considers themselves an artist, an author that never thought about business or sales. But it's true. You are the person most responsible for telling the world about your fantastic book. You don't have to do it alone. We would love to help you. We have a fantastic program called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. We've assembled a panel of evaluators of kids, parents, teachers, and if they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a certified great read. And with that status comes a number of really useful tools that can help you let the world know that your book is worthy of their consideration, and that it's a book that they should add to their family library. You can find out more about it at our website, readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. I want to thank Kristin Mahoney. Check out the 47 people you'll meet in middle school. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Check out her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank my amazing, beautiful wife for all the support that she gives me. And I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.